Hey, folks, and welcome to Counterclipping Show number 131 for June 10th, 2023. I'd like to thank you all for coming. Tonight, we are going to talk about Operation Market Garden, and I'd be clipping an Operation Market Garden game if I wasn't still working on GD42, which we're probably not going to quite finish tonight, but we are into the Soviets. The Germans are all done. So we are well along on that, and then there will eventually be a storage solution for this game. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, not for GD42 specifically. So before we get started, let me turn on the ticker, because we got to do that. And I've got all my windows out of order here. So hooray for me. I would like to remind everybody that if you are enjoying the show, please do subscribe to the channel. Please thumbs up the video. It is much appreciated. It helps the channel out with the dreaded YouTube algorithm. So hopefully we will get good numbers tonight. We will see what happens. I have done no promotional work whatsoever. So anybody that shares this around, that is much appreciated as well. Super chats and super stickers are on. If you would like to help support the show as a one-shot type of thing, that is a great way to do it. It is also a great way to get your comment highlighted so that I don't otherwise miss it, which is a thing that, as we have seen, has been known to happen. And if you want to do more, there's a thing links to all the things in the video description, including the Patreon and the merch store and all that stuff. So that is much appreciated. So let's actually first talk about what we're drinking. We are killing the Glenlivet 15 tonight. The last of it is in the glass, and it is very good, and we are enjoying it very much. Thank you, Scott, for sending that my way. There might be something else that's a little goody-headed my way, too, which I will hope to be bringing you next week. And there are, in fact, a couple of things headed my way. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment here without getting completely sidetracked against the topic of Operation Market Garden, which is one of my favorite wargaming topics, at least certainly within the World War II space. But before we get to any of that, let's say hello to A Gray Day, Andrew Cook, welcome to the stream. Brent from the Armchair Dragoons is here. Brent McCabe, Chet Bell, Cyberfield Marshall, Daniel Brown, Daniel Silverthorne, David Imperato, David Zell, Ed Holtzman, Ed Meister, GWG Gaming with Garavalia, the legend himself, Fucko is here in the chat. James Conway, Jason W., Jason Williams, Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Edwards, Joe Faust from sunny Northeast Ohio. We are actually sunny today. Joe Okabayashi, Joe Perez, Joe Mentum, John Clark, Frank Davis is here, Loquitur Gaming, Mark Flanagan, Matt Davidson, Nerd Workshop, Pat Mullen, Pat, thanks for stopping by, Paul Sin, Paul West, Ray Garby, Richard D. Fortuna, Scott Bell, Stacking Limit is here, Tim Greenhaw, Todd Cox, Tony Mammal, and Vince Ree. And I apologize in advance because I know there's folks that I am missing. I know Vicky is here in the chat, so thanks, Vicky, for coming by. Neil Badkey. It seems, and Stuka Joe is here. Awesome. Thank you, Joe, for stopping by. Always great to have you. The YouTube participants list seems exceptionally touchy this evening. So not much I can say about that. We do have what I'm kind of bundling together as wargaming relevant news here tonight. And this is going to cover kind of a whole bunch of stuff. First of all, if you would like to see pretty extensive coverage of all the wargaming and wargaming adjacent stuff that happened at Origins, please do check out the Armchair Dragoons. There is a link to their site for their events calendar in the video description, but they have a ton of wargaming content that happened at Origins over there. So check that out if you are interested. In addition, if you didn't get your fill when I talked about it for most of the show, I do have a very interesting, it's not a Kickstarter, but it is a crowdfunding effort to show you here tonight. This is on GameFound, which is kind of an alternative to Kickstarter. It is from a group called Sound of Drums, and it is called ILAO 1807. They've been showing this off on Facebook and in some other places for a while now, and it looks pretty neat. And I don't know when this is coming out. If it comes out this year, 2023 is definitely going to be the year of ILAO, because Winter's Victory will be out anytime, basically. And that's one of the things that may well be on its way to me anytime. In addition to that, although I don't have an incoming package from New England, so presumably New England Simulations ships from New England, but hey, maybe not. Um, so the counters, the maps look really nice. All the physical components look very nice. This looks very interesting. I am going to throw a link to the Game Found page in the chat right now for those of you interested in checking this out. And I gotta tell you, I am I mean, it all looks really good. It's like 1,200 counters, right? It says 5/9" counters, which is weird, but maybe they're metric. And look at these slick counter animations. I mean, that's slick. So this looks really neat. In addition to this, maybe this year, and Winter's Victory, we also are supposed to get the new Lavatai de Preußisch Eilau. I'm not a little less convinced that that's going to be out this year personally, but it could happen. And I think Ed said that it's supposed to. But if that happens, Eric may have a better Eric of Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles is here in the chat, and he may have a better angle on what the timetable is for Clash of Arms' ILAU than I do. Marty Sample says that NES ships from Mark Hinkle's Kitchen in New Hampshire, which is pretty much what I thought. So I'm thinking Ed Holtzman. I'm thinking it's probably 5/8, but this is a European company. So that could be the nearest metric equivalent. I don't know. So lots of ILAU goodness. Now, in addition to, I'll pull this down. I put the link in the chat. So if anybody wants to go check that out, feel free to do so. In addition to this, dropping today is the trailer, or at least the first trailer for Ridley Scott's Napoleon that is coming both to theaters around Thanksgiving and at some point, probably not long thereafter, to Apple TV Plus or whatever the Apple TV thing is called. And so if you're interested in that, and you probably ought to be, it looks pretty cool. You should go check that trailer out. Now, on the subject of ILAU, now a battle that I take to be ILAU features fairly heavily in the trailer, including what I think has been pointed out as maybe of dubious authenticity, where French cannons bombard the frozen lakes and plunge a bunch of Russian and/or Prussian soldiers to their deaths. That's in the trailer, so I'm not spoiling it for anybody. I have a hunch, and I hope to be wrong, that they are going to combine Eylau and Friedland, and after the battle that you see in the trailer, then you're going to get the summit at Tilsit with Tsar Alexander. That's just a hunch, but part of that is just, it's going to be really hard to pack all of Napoleon into 2 hours and 45 minutes, which is about what it says. That could be Austerlitz. Was the weather that bad at Austerlitz, though? And there were frozen lakes. There were no frozen lakes at Austerlitz, to my knowledge. There was a swamp, but yeah. So I'm totally up for watching that. I am less confident than I would like to be in it, to be completely honest. But I'll be happy to watch it, and I will probably. Jason Williams says the cannons into the lake is Austerlitz. Well, having Austerlitz in the movie, if it's not Eylau, probably makes more sense if you think about it. I do think Joaquin Phoenix, who's a marvelous actor, I do think he's a little old for the part at this point, at least to play the young Napoleon. And Napoleon was pretty young at that time. So, am I misremembering that? That's plausible. Dave D'Angelo says that Market Garden games suffer from some wildly inaccurate mapping. That may be true, and from the chatter from Carl Fung, who's researched his share of Market Garden games at this point, it's apparently a fairly difficult battle to research from a number of judging from the number, particularly from the German side. So that's oh, cool. Brant says that they're probably going to have an all-day game of Market Garden of It Never Snows at the Fall Assembly Mini Convention in October in North Carolina. There's info on that on the Armchair Dragoons page as well. And obviously, It Never Snows does make the list here. I think I got 17 games, something like that. Okay, so Joe Perez says that when the lake at Austerlitz was drained a year after the battle, less than 100 bodies were found, myth larger than reality. I mean, they also have said that about Eylau, and I think that was scholars are not are arguing over how important that was. And I may be getting the two battles mixed up. That's possible, although they're fairly distinct battles. But they are both winter battles. Our Austerlitz happens in December, and Eylau happens in like February, as I recall, something like that. Do I have? Yeah, I'm not screwing this up, so that's cool. But we'll see about the movie. You do see Josephine in the movie. You have a character that I take to be Paul Barra in the movie, um, and some British fella who's obviously set up to be the bad guy in the film. Assuming that's not Napoleon. It's a very intriguing looking film. So let's, if you want to check that out, check that out. It's on YouTube. Search for Napoleon trailer. WBC starts on the 22nd of this month, right? Is that this month or next month? Shit. Is that shit? Somebody by the time I get to it, July 22nd to July 30th. Yeah, okay. So that's this month. I wasn't screwing that up. So it sounds like I am going to day trip out on the 29th. It's about a 3-hour drive from here. So that is a manageable drive. That is a Saturday. You're welcome, Dan. Dan knows why. I don't know if he's watching or not. Probably not, but um, Dan knows why I'm going out there. So Dan's not going to be there. So Dave D'Angelo says that no designer has ever reached out to local Dutch historians from the Market Garden areas that can answer all their questions and who speak excellent English. I can guarantee they speak excellent English. And he's used those resources himself to get answers. So yeah, that sounds like a very good idea. It's not as though the prevalence of outstanding spoken English in the Netherlands is low. After all, I think it's in the neighborhood of 90% of the population um, speaks English to some extent. And my personal experience talking to a lot of Dutch people on the phone in the middle of the night over the years certainly backs that up. Definitely higher than it is in Germany, I can tell you that. Matt Taylor mentions It Never Snows in September by Robert J. Kershaw, one of the few books on the German point of view. I've got a couple books on it, of course, the Cornelius Ryan. Um, I mean, we'll talk about Market Garden very shortly. Okay, so what else do I got? On to Richmond 2 should be on its way to me. I am already printing counter trays for it. So that should you'll see it on this counter clipping stream. Let me put it that way, unless it shows up on Thursday and I have it clipped by Monday, which is not impossible. I'm probably going to need another day or two to finish printing all the trays that I want. So Hexy, thanks for stopping by. Half-ass gaming. There will be eventually. The fact is, I kind of set aside all the stuff that I do want to get either sell or give away. And there are some giveaways coming. I just have kind of been dragging my feet as to actually getting that actually going. But there's not really that much to get rid of. There's not nothing, but there are a couple of duplicates that I could get rid of. But I'm in a place where I'm reluctant to dump things. So let's see. Paul West says that early PSA CLS in Atlanta is still accepting pre-orders for On to Richmond at $169 plus shipping and handling and tax. That is roughly the MMP pre-order price. Obviously, you can't get that price from MMP anymore. So if you want it, that's a really good price because it is expensive. Scott Bell asks, how long does it take me to drive to Seven Springs? I believe it's 3.5 hours. I did map it the other day. I didn't really. I mean, I mapped it just to figure out how long it's going to take to drive. What that day looks like is I leave at 7 in the morning, 6 in the morning, something like that. Drive out there, spend 5 or 6 hours out there, then drive home. That is what my day trip to WBC is probably going to look like. Matt Davidson has already gotten his replacement maps for On to Richmond 2. And I'm kind of hoping that I get both sets of maps in the box. I don't know if they did that or not. It would be nice if they did, because what are they going to do with the extra maps for one thing? And hell, I'll frame one set and put it on the wall. I've got wall space that would benefit greatly from having Charlie Kidler maps on the wall. So, um, excellent. William Bird says A Bridge Too Far is on Prime Video this month as well. That is, at one point, it was actually on YouTube, uninterrupted by commercials. It may be back now, interrupted by commercials. So Agre Day asks, and I think this is a legitimate question, and I'm sure there's people chiming in on this. Even Stigler points out that it actually looks well worth $220. There is approximately 3 full games in it, and that is the answer to the question. There is a new version of On to Richmond, a new version of Grant Takes Command, and the all new Petersburg campaign. Now, the actual changes to the 2 re-releases are probably pretty minor, going by previous re-releases, but that's because those are really great games that didn't really need a lot of work. So I am pretty completely comfortable with that, even owning, as I do, all of the previous games. It is in a 3-inch box. It looks to me from the unboxing I've watched like you can fit 2 counter trays in it. But I will also point out that I am going to 3D print counter trays for it. And thus, I will not care whether you can fit conventional counter trays in it or not. Lee Grant says, "Thank you for the 3D printer files. I really do hope that folks are getting good use out of those. For those who don't know, the STL files for my custom trays for counters are available to $5 and up level patrons. That seemed to me to be the best and most workable solution to people asking for the files, and me wanting something back for them, and but not wanting to like physically try to monetize physical and ship physical product, which seemed to be impractical, more for reasons of, is that the same color or not? It looks like it is. More because I can't operate at that economy of scale, right? I mean, I've got one printer, and if I had a full print farm, it might be something else. But I don't, and I'm not going to have a print farm anytime soon. So these are different colors, aren't they? Crap. Now let's hope it's correct. I'll sort these out. These are just going into baggies for now. I will sort all this out in the course of time when I do 3D printed counter trays for this thing. So Eric Goebel says, "Is CLS Games online only, or do they have a storefront?" That's a good question. I don't know. Somebody might actually know that. But I do know that they do a lot of business through the BGG marketplace, or at least they did before BGG decided they were going to monkey up their marketplace. Um, so Stigler has some issues with the system, of course. And I've heard Stigler's issues with the system before, and he's not actually wrong about any of that stuff, but those are largely preference things. I think it's a brilliant system. Perfidious Albion asks, "Why is Mr. President wrought with errors or other quality issues?" So I was pointed at a thread on a forum. I don't remember what forum it was, so I apologize for that, where there are some people making noise about throwing around quotes like "totally unplay tested" and "only published because the game is the publisher's game" and riddled with errors and that kind of stuff. And I got to tell you, I am not all the way through a turn yet. And there are some errors and a few presentational issues. However, on balance, I am failing to see a major or critical issue with the quality of the editing or play testing at this point. I mean, we've seen this thing get play tested for years now. So I am at this point considering that kind of commentary to be hyperbolic and unuseful. But I will have more to say about Mr. President once I have finished playing through my playthrough series of Mr. President, at which point I will have played an entire turn. And while I will not do a review, I will do like a final thoughts video. My impression of it is pretty positive so far, to be completely honest. Yeah, there's some errors and there's some typos that they should have caught, like the leave it like on the cards specifically. But I'm not really seeing anything that's massively screwing anything up, in my opinion. But I haven't like examined all of the 160 cards that's in the game, and I'm probably not going to do that at least before I finish the game. I probably will after the playthrough. I probably will kind of buzz through the cards just to get a sense of what all the different events look like. So, the Perryville game is out. Yes, Grand Havoc from Revolution Games, a new Blind Swords game is out. You can get it from Revolution Games at this point. So Nordic Maelstrom, we'll see you when you get back. It's all good. Tom MC says it's littered with errors and the design is ludological spaghetti code. Really not seeing that. The game tells you to set it up and just go through the flip book. Now, are there things that should be either in the how to play book or in the flip book and are either in the governing manual or in the briefings book? Yes, there are. And I will point those things out. And I actually point some of those things out in the videos already. Some rubbish on the floor here. That's gonna screw my OCD. So I'm really not seeing littered with errors. Are there errors? Yes, there are. There's some there, and there's also a errata file over at GMT, which does not cover all of the errors that folks have identified. I'll point that out as well. So, okay. So anyway, I hate the word review, but I'm pleased that I'm getting the playthrough video done because I haven't. It's literally been years since I've done playthrough video. So Alistair Logie has had no issues so far, but it's still in the shrink. So yeah, it looks great in the shrink. It's a fabulous piece of shelf ornamentation, if nothing else. Dave D'Angelo says that Hell's Highway with the replacement counters, I'll talk about Hell's Highway in a minute. And Holland 44 are Dave's top choices. BCS attempt, that is somewhere in the BCS pipeline. That is an insta order for me. Findle70 says that this may be a matter of mainstream board gamers not realizing that even the biggest companies that make war games, like GMT, is much smaller than what a medium-sized board game company can do. This is true. However, GMT is also the biggest company in our space. So if we are going to cut slack to war game publishers, I do think we should cut GMT less slack than we cut to anybody else, basically. But that said, again, I'm failing to note a lack of critical issues. And as you watch the playthrough video, you'll see me stop and say, this is not clear a couple of times. And it's not clear a couple of times. But by and large, I think I'm pretty happy with both the game and the presentation. Anyway, so we got 137 right now, which is pretty good. I'm trying to kind of, again, my lighting in here is just, let's turn this on and see if that makes any difference. It does, maybe a little. Yeah, but then it's shining in my face, so we can't have that. Anyway, I don't have a light overhead. I have a light up here because I'm recording. And unfortunately, there's like the color bars to identify the unit formations in this game are really, really subtle. Yeah, well, I don't know if Wayne's reviewing it or not, but it is a solitaire game, and Wayne does solitaire games. So I will if Wayne does a review of Mr. President, I will watch it with interest. So and the next Goss game is a Market Garden game as well. Now, I didn't put any upcoming games on this list. Otherwise, the Goss Market Garden game and the BCS Market Garden game, which I don't expect to see until at least 2025, would both make this list because those are both insta buys for me. Anyway, Perfidious Albion says GMT is great with errata and support. Most of the time, they address this in their C3I. rag. So, see, I think it's unfair to call C3I a rag, but I'm going to have a criticism here in that when you get errata counters for GMT games, you have to buy C3I, which is a $50 magazine to get it, and then you got to pay shipping, right? It is a terrific magazine in its own right. I think it's worth buying. But I am kind of annoyed that if I have if I need errata counters from Compass, I email Bill and say, Bill, I need errata counters, and Bill sends me errata counters. I don't have to pay a $50, 65 or $68 for a magazine to get the errata counters. So that's pretty irritating. Now, somebody else posted on social media today that these errata counters for Pacific War were desperately needed, or something to that effect. And that's not really true, unless more errata counters were uncovered since I last saw the list. You're really only going to run into there's more than enough counters to cover everything you need in the game, unless you are playing the strategic scenarios. If you are playing the huge, grand, epic Mondo Grand Campaign, then you do need the errata counters. If not, you absolutely can live without them. And I haven't picked up the new C3I yet, and I need to because of that and because of the GBOH stuff. This is a criticism that Fendel70, that Goss MG, if you played nonstop, this would take longer than the actual battle. A, I don't think that's true. And B, because among reasonably competent but non-expert Goss players, we consistently get 3 or 4 turns a day played. And that is a day or a day and a third in game time. So I don't think that's true. And I think that it is a kind of transparently ridiculous criticism when it is levied, which it is something I hear all the time, because this applies to every single tactical game ever. Some of the battles that are simulated by Squad and ASL, for example, were over in 15 minutes, and ASL will take 6 hours to play. So I don't think that's a real criticism. It's a funny zinger, but it's not a real criticism. Let me put it that way. Paulson says he assumed Mr. President would attract a lot of gaming normies, so not surprised at reactions. Now, interestingly, the only people I have seen talking about it are people who are inside the wargaming space, at least to some extent. So, this is true, Mark Flanagan. So GMT did indeed send out a corrections kit for Imperial Struggle, and I believe for No Enemies, No Bridges Burning as well, a couple of years ago. But that's the exception rather than the rule. Normally, you got to buy C3I to get that stuff. And he mentions All Bridges Burning as well, which I've heard good things about. Right. If there are in the published errata that I printed out, and they may have updated it. It's been a few days since I did that. There's like 4 actual pieces of errata in there. None of which addressed any of the things that I saw people pointing out that were legitimate errors. None of which addressed any of the fuzzy rules sections that I thought were fuzzy. So the errata could be better, but I'm sure that the errata will get better. So, John Stanley, thanks very much. Did anyone play Close Combat, a bridge too far for the PC back in the day? I certainly did not. I can tell you that. I never played any of the Close Combat games. That's the same color? I think so. Very hard to tell. So if anybody has, pipe up and tell us what you thought of it. Findle70 says, a lot of non-war gamers on Twitter are actually excited by the concept of Mr. President. I bought it. Okay, that's cool. I guess I have not seen that. It's not impossible that I have missed that, especially considering the shit show that my Twitter feed is at this time. Chet Bell says he still plays Close Combat, a bridge too far. Okay, so let me finish up the news here so we can actually get on to Market Garden. I've already said that On to Richmond 2 is on the way. We are resuming Last Blitzkrieg this week. That's on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to getting back into that. Assuming we have a full complement of 4 players, we should take no more than three more weeks to finish the thing. Maybe 4, I suppose, but we're pretty close to the end. And I don't like to talk about it on this show, but the CSR Awards show will be out real soon. I don't want to nail it down to a specific date just in case there's a snafu. But it's right here. So you will be seeing news on that imminently. And it will be well before the end of the month, is what it's sounding like. We said July. We're definitely going to make July. Let me put it that way. I just don't know that we're going to make the actual date that we're shooting for. But it's real close. So I think we're in great shape there. All right. So Operation Market Garden. This is September 17th. Lasts for 5, 7, 10 days. Depends on where you want to cut it off. God damn it. Depends on where you want to cut it off. Let me move this over here, I suppose. All right. I'm going to fix this by re-adding it. There we go. All right. Operation Market Garden. If you haven't seen the film A Bridge Too Far, I highly recommend you go watch the film A Bridge Too Far because it's great. It has an all-star cast, and it is a pretty good summary. Don't consider it like super accurate military history, but it it provides a pretty good summary of what happened. So the basic idea is it is September 1944, and the Germans have been in pretty much headlong retreat for a while. And Montgomery, in his infinite wisdom, decides that it would be awesome if they could seize a bridge over the Rhine, even though they're a substantial amount of distance away from the Rhine, 50 or 60, 70 miles, 80, 82 miles, something like that, behind the Rhine right now. Okay. So an audacious plan is developed whereby there are a series of bridges that will be seized by 3 airborne divisions. The U.S. 101st will seize the bridge at Eindhoven, and there's a couple lesser bridges as well. The U.S. 82nd will seize the bridge at Nijmegen, and the British 1st Airborne will seize the bridge at Arnhem, the bridge over the Neder Rhine, the lower Rhine. And presumably, if they can hold that, then they have a free bridge into Germany, right into the Ruhr, the industrial, or nearby to the adjacent, at least, to the Ruhr, the industrial heartland of Germany. Now, the airborne divisions can't be expected to just hold this territory forever. So a large, mostly armored column, British 30 Corps, is assigned to drive up the road and relieve each airborne division in turn. And historically, of course, they didn't make it. Because the whole thing, Montgomery's protestations to the contrary notwithstanding, um, the whole operation is predicated on the whole thing happening correctly. Extremely complex operation. Allied mistakes were made, and it would have required near perfect Allied execution to actually succeed. The Germans threw everything they had available at the Allies, including an SS marching band, and did manage to stall the Allies around Nijmegen. And the British First Airborne was forced to the part of the British First Airborne did make it into um, um, Arnhem and seized the near half of the or one side of the bridge, but they were never relieved, and the rest of the British First Airborne was pinned against the river at Oosterbeek or Oosterbeek. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly in Dutch. And they had to be extracted across the river, an event which is dramatized in the Band of Brothers um, mini series, which is worth watching on its own, right? That's about all. Well, I won't say that, but the it's Band of Brothers is awesome, and you should watch it. Carl says not necessarily a marching band, but it was the band leading the 3rd SS Vach Battalion, which were concentration camp guards. Wow, that they had a band is something else, I guess you got to say. John Longshore says he just finished Strange New Worlds last 2 episodes. I have not. I'm about halfway through the first season, so I got to get caught up on it at some point. I believe the entire first season has been dropped to YouTube, but I probably should resubscribe to Paramount Plus at some point. There are a variety of things on there that I would like to watch. So there's that. So, and this is true. Jeff Anderson points out that the Allies had a bunch of plans to use the airborne, and then by the time it came to drop the airborne, the Allies had advanced too far to drop the airborne, and they already occupied those positions. So that is accurate, right? And that is broadly summarized in the movie as well. And the book, "A Bridge Too Far," is a great, I don't want to call it introductory, but if you haven't read anything about Market Garden specifically, like a whole book, it is a very good place to start. Okay, so and as Agray Day points out, and the movie points out, speed was of the essence, and they weren't fast enough. And all kinds of problems arose, like the single lane highway that they had to take, that was surrounded by polder, which is a terrain that's like this waterlogged ground because it's reclaimed from the sea by the Dutch. And you cannot drive vehicles across that; they will bog immediately. And then you blow up one tank on the single lane road in the front, and then you got a big problem because there's a flaming wreck blocking the road. And again, all this is at least shown in the movie, if not explained as such. Market Garden plan. This is an interesting comparison, actually. Dave D'Angelo says that Market Garden's plan reminds him of the Japanese plan for Midway. Everything had to go right for it to succeed. And as we also saw with the Japanese plan for Midway, it did not go all right for the Japanese. In fact, you could probably say it went almost perfectly for the Americans. Paul West says the hubris of the American talks about the hubris of the American generals. There's probably something to this, but I mean, if you're gonna talk about hubris, I think you got to point the finger at Montgomery, don't you? Or maybe Browning. Browning was kind of Montgomery's man on the ground. And you'll notice in the movie, and I think this is a conscious decision on the filmmaker's part, Montgomery's not in the movie. Montgomery is not on the ground directing these guys, okay? Or, whatever. Montgomery's nowhere in sight. Montgomery's doing his Montgomery things elsewhere, or signing orders to not give the Canadians bullets, for example. So anyway, Dave Angelo says that this part of the Netherlands where his mother was from was not reclaimed polder, but some of the better farmland in the Netherlands. Well, I mean, there's polder around this, and then there's not. I mean, you did also say that there are also mapping problems with many Market Garden games. If Carl, who is in the chat tonight, would like to comment on that, I would be delighted to hear what he has to say. Overly complicated plans, as Eric Schaefer points out, often get the planners into trouble because they then cannot be executed. All right, so these are in kind of my opinion of them order, and we're going to start therefore with Highway to the Right. There are 3 editions of this: 2 editions from SPI back in the day, and 1 edition from Decision Games. Findle70, thanks very much. He says that a great book to supplement is John McManus's September Hope, which exclusively looks at the 82nd and 101st actions in the battle. That's actually really attractive because there's I feel like I see more about the British 1st Airborne and Arnhem than I do about the stuff that the 82nd and the 101st were up to. So that actually sounds very interesting. But there are plenty of good books available on Market Garden. I don't want to say plenty, but there are, you're not gonna not be able to find books. Start with A Bridge Too Far. X to X says this is the most favoritist Market Garden game, and Stigler hates it as usual. Now, Stigler has put his money where his mouth is on this and has done a video about why he feels that this is in fact a terrible and broken game. And I am going to, although I don't feel as strongly about it as Stigler, I do think that I am closer to Stigler's position on this than Hexy's, I have to say. Carl says that Dave is right. South of the Moss wasn't pure polder; it was heath and other kinds of land. North of the Moss and Lower Rhine was polder. So presumably we will see this revised terrain in the new BCS Market Garden game, which several people tonight have already said, they, including myself, that they are extremely excited for. There is a great that I love Sean Connery in this movie because he's like literally trapped in an attic at one point. I'm like, he's like, fuck, I can't get up, stuck in his attic, man. We got shit to do. I can't just sit up here. Um, but yes, Urquhart was maybe not the greatest choice for commander of that. But you know, you could say that about a number of these folks too. I don't think you can really criticize Gavin too much. Some people have, but I won't. I think you can criticize Browning. Um, I don't think you can say too much bad about Taylor, but you can say some bad things about Horrocks, who's my personal favorite character in the movie. But you know, that decision to kind of stop and consolidate around Nijmegen was not well received. Let me put it that way. So you know, I want you want to like this too, right? And it's the first big Market Garden game. But by all accounts, it's got some very serious problems, and the second edition does not fix those problems. And the decision version definitely does not fix those problems. That is basically the same game with, I think, a light revision and nicer components. But it is not a game that I think solves any of the issues that Stigler would have with the original. I think it kind of falls into the noble effort category, and it's pretty nice looking for when it came out, which is 1977. Um, Credits on this, according to BTG, are Eric Goldberg, Irad Hardy, and Jay Nelson. Once again, there's some interesting designer pedigree going on there. Eric Goldberg and Irad Hardy both did some really remarkable games. And I think Jay Nelson has two, but his name is less forward in my mind at the moment. Yes, Corax is played in the film by the fabulous Edward Fox, who was pretty much great in everything he was in, even if it was a very small role. Um, All right, there we go. All right, continuing on here. All right, so uh so I'm not going to express any faith in the decision version, right? And that's not because I've examined it closely. It's because I don't have confidence in decision in this particular type of project to have fundamentally fixed the underlying issues. Now, I will then say, though, that their version of War in Europe does at least attempt to address some of the underlying structural issues with War in Europe. And I'm glad that it did. And I think the price that it goes for shows that. And obviously, it's a tremendous graphical improvement as well. Edward Fox was great in The Day of the Jackal. I think Carl says it's just dated now. There's no question that it's dated now. As I think you have to, if you're being honest about it. There's a lot of SPI stuff that still holds up really well, but there's a lot of stuff that's really dated as well. So, all right, let's see here. Just dying about these counter colors here. At least these are green versus tan. I could tell the difference there. William Aarons, welcome from Kitchener, Ontario. So Carl says that the decision Highway to the Reich is not the same system as SPI's Highway to the Reich, and it is definitely not Gauss. I agree with that. But my understanding on the decision version is that it is largely the same game with some changes. I will be delighted to be corrected on that, and Carl appears to be correcting me on that. But I'm not going to go pick Decisions version up for the sake of looking at it, to be blunt. So now another game that they did that with, though, was and maybe this is why I'm assuming that is War Between the States, which is like the exact same game with better graphics and some of the options incorporated. Agray Day asks, is the Decision Games development process a black hole? Are they self-aware and don't care, or are they just feeding themselves games? So Schindler's going to be mad when I say this, but I do think they're aware of it. And over the last few years, under the guidance of Doug Johnson, they have paid much closer attention to quality control than they have in the past. That hasn't been perfect. But we have seen the results. We have seen an improvement in the quality of the magazine games, for example, as we have seen an improvement in the quality of some of the boxed games as well. There have still been some that maybe aren't great, to be honest. So, um, all right. So moving on from Highway to the Reich, which I think we're in general agreement that nostalgia aside, I wouldn't consider that. Now, if somebody wanted to sell me a copy for like $40 in the soapbox, yeah, I would totally buy that. But that would just be for examination value rather than to attempt to play it. There are other Market Garden games, including two big ones on this list, that I would certainly attempt to play first. This is not one of them. This is a tactics game, Arnhem Bridge. And I don't know anything about. I never played any tactics games. One thing that immediately jumps out at you is, and this is not the only example, is that the box covers are extremely attractive. I really like the box cover for this. They did at least two other box covers that I thought were really, really nice looking. This is a pretty higher level than Health Highway treatment of Market Garden. It is on a hex map. I don't. John Longshore, we may actually get to see that. There have been a couple. Monty's Gamble started out as a magazine game, technically. It doesn't look a little like Nick Cage, but it looks like Nick Cage today, and this thing's from like 1982. I'm right; it's actually from 1982. So I don't have a lot of opinion on this. It doesn't have a spectacular rating on BGG, but I don't know what any conclusion anybody should draw from that, one way or the other. Um, so don't have a lot to say about this one other than to remark on the very nice cover, which does appear to be the actual bridge at Arnhem Bridge. So if you go there now, it's not the same bridge. They've rebuilt it, but it looks basically like the same bridge. And it is called the John Frost Bridge now, by the way. I can also see, now that John Longshore has said that, a resemblance to El Pacino. Next up is another one that I don't. Ooh, we've lost a nut on the counter clipper. We're obviously going to have to fix that. This is Operation Market Garden from Hobby Japan. Now, this has the same cover art as GMT's Air Bridge to Victory. However, I don't think they're the same game. I believe instead that the connection is Roger McGowan, who may well have been either in Japan or working with Hobby Japan at this time. Hexy asks, okay, we got some things in the chat here we got to address. So first of all, Stigler says any game that plays in 1 to 2 hours likely isn't worth the paper it's printed on. A few exceptions to that rule. I don't agree with this. However, my tastes agree with this, right? I am going to lean towards the bigger games, the more complicated games, the games that you can play in, on the short end, say 6 to 10 hours, as opposed to a game that on the short end you can finish in half an hour, and on the long end maybe it's 2. I lean into the bigger games, but who cares? That's just what I like. And if somebody really wants to play a 1 to 2 hour Market Garden game, then go ahead. To answer Hexy's question, no, I really don't. But so another thing that I should point out on this list is to make it onto this list, the game has to cover the entire operation. So there's like a ton of tactical games that cover parts of the operation. I did combine games into kind of one listing in 2 cases, which you will see when they come up, that I felt as long as you combined the games, it still qualified. So obviously I don't know anything about this, but it doesn't appear to be the same game as Air Bridge to Victory. Clark Commando says, yeah, so Mark, thanks for coming by. I am also, I'm happy to play not Monsters too, but I'd rather play Monsters, right? That's one of the reasons why I bought Mr. President, because if there's a solitaire narrative game around that's a monster game, that's the thing. So, all right, so next up is Tide of Fortune. This is part of the Battle for France series from designer John Shetler and 3W. Now, this is a series that I have heard Let's say mixed things on. There were some people that liked it, and there are some it tended to hit interesting topics, right? There's a Normandy game, which I believe is to the far shore. And that Italy four game sequence in S&T from years ago, early on in Decisions Run, which had potential, but had potential, if you know what I'm saying. Um, Also, I think was to me a very attractive topic. So there's great alignment between me and the um, West Wall system, as it's called. And unfortunately, the game system is not that well regarded. This has a lower rating than the Tactics game on BGG. Again, grain of salt, or Saltberg, if you will. Um, by the way, they just demolished the Avalon Hill building in and or around Baltimore. For those who were lucky enough to visit it when it was around. So Tide of Fortune, I don't really know anything about this. The map looks okay for a early 90s 3W game. There's a decent amount of I think there's a if at some point we'll do like a 3W show but it's going to be a lot of discussion of boy, this game had a lot of potential. And this is another one where I think it had a lot of potential, right? This is two maps, 300 counters, so it's decent sized. Approximately the same size as Hell's Highway, but frankly, Hell's Highway is much more fondly remembered than this is. Arnhem 44. This is one that I have basically no familiarity with. Judging from the BGG listing, this is from MDVC Games by designer Dirk Vergouwen. And I don't know anything about it. The BGG listing compares it to Axis and Allies, which is not a recommendation for me, but lots of people like Axis and Allies, so this thing could be great for all I know. This thing is also, I will point out, got a wow. This one the ranking among war games for this is actually one better than for the Tactics Market Garden game. It looks real Axis and Allies with plastic little tanks and bits and bobs and stuff like that. John Longshore, we have already talked about the Napoleon trailer. We might talk about it some more later. All right, so I don't know anything about that, and I certainly don't know anything about this. This is Market Gardener from designer whose name I am going to totally butcher, Wojciech Zaluski, and it's from Taktika I Strategia in Poland. And if nothing else, they have striking box covers. And just glancing at the maps, the map looks decent. Although it doesn't really look like Market Garden to me, to be perfectly honest. But artistically, it looks nice. So I don't really know anything about this. This is also this has no rating. And Tactica e Strategia Strategia does not really have a lot of penetration into the English speaking wargaming market. Let me put it that way. And I think that's unfortunate actually, because they have a number of things that have looked interesting to me, including this, that I could theoretically, I'm probably resourceful enough to get them, but I probably don't want to take the time to get them. I'm a little this appears to cover the entire operation. I don't like the counters, but that's an aesthetic choice. They're or they're not silhouettes. They're like little pictures of tanks and dudes. And for a scale that's going to cover the whole of Market Garden, I'd prefer NATO symbols. I will say this about Critical Hit. Their map art tends to be at least decent. So there's folks already making this comparison on Twitter, actually, and I have already said that although Steiger is really, really good in that film, I don't actually think that Waterloo is. And there's certainly some moments in that movie that are just magical. But on balance, I don't think that that's as good a movie as wargamers tend to think. I think it's a good wargamer movie, but I don't think it's a particularly good movie. And that's true even more for Waterloo than it is for something like Gettysburg. So can't tell you a lot about this. I don't know where you could get it. There is a copy in Germany for sale for 30 euros right now on the PGG marketplace, and Noble Knight has it for $40 actually, which seems like a very reasonable price. Actually, hell, that's tempting. If I had $30, I might think about that. So, and Joe Perez says that the quad games, then this is a pretty good rule of thumb, actually. Generally had two very good games, one very good game, two average games, and one stinker. And there's a reason why that rule of thumb was developed. Let me put it that way. There's always going to be, in any package like that, there's always going to be one that's better than the rest of them, right? But especially in games like Art of Siege, where they're radically different games. Um, so the movie appears to have coverage of Napoleon throughout his career, at least starting in 1792-93. If you look at the trailer, you see stuff from late and early. So, but Joaquin Phoenix does not appear to have aged at all. He looks too old throughout, to be honest. So this is another thing actually, and I found this out buying Cube for Me trays. The shipping from Poland is very reasonable. So good job Poland for not boning everybody on shipping like pretty much the rest of the entire planet is doing right now. So bravo Poland. This is unquestionably true. My issue with Waterloo is that cinematically, other than the large battle scenes, which are absolutely magnificent, it's cinematically in many ways not up to current movie standards, or even early 1970s American movie standards. To be honest, American movies have of the era had way better use of music, for example. Casting would generally be way better. Virtually nobody gets any screen time in the movie except for Napoleon and Wellington. And there is that scene stealing Blucher moment, admittedly. But there's a lot of colorful characters in the period that you could at least have given a brief scene that have dialogue in the movie, and they're just played by boring actors that nobody cares about. All right, so well, Steyer was probably the right age at the time to play Napoleon at that age, right? A little older, I think, but it's okay if you play kind of a Napoleon with a lot of miles on him at that point. All right, that's not the one I'm talking about. So Eric Schaefer, Vorwärts, my children. No, the one I'm thinking of. Raise the black flag. Have no mercy. I'll kill any man with mercy in his eyes. That's just a great Blucher line. And the dude they got to play Blucher looks just like Blucher, and the guy they got to play Ney looks just like Ney. Unfortunately, they're not given material with which to be interesting. Um, okay, so shipping from Europe. Actually, I've heard shipping from France isn't that bad, to be honest. From people who've ordered stuff directly from, say, Hexasim, to be honest. Yes, that's a great scene. I love that scene. And of course, Stewart gets dressed down in private, and Lee as played by Martin Sheen, has absolutely no time for Stewart's bullshit right now. Thank you very much, sir. Get back to work. So that's a great scene, and I really like. Although Martin Sheen is not the perfect choice to play Lee, I think everybody agrees on that. Martin Sheen did a really good job with that material. So uh, Grognard Rich, first of all, welcome to the stream, says Hollywood is more entertainment than documentary. Napoleon will be no exception. That's, of course, absolutely true. And I am prepared to cut the film some slack. I mean, I love Gladiator, and it's bullshit. The entire movie is 2.5 hours of bullshit. So, and it's a great movie, and it's a Ridley Scott movie. I'm more concerned about Ridley Scott as the director than anything else, because I think if he has good material to work from, he produces wonderful movies. If he has bad material to work from, he produces ghastly tripe like Prometheus. So it really depends on him. Okay, so this is Mercury Market Garden. So this is all of Market Garden and most of Operation Mercury. This is a Mike Ranella game, but Mike Ranella seems nowadays, at least, to be most known for um, his continuing support of the area impulse type of games, and this is not one. This is on a hex map. I had flagged this to get it at one point, and I never did. This is from Worthington Publishing. It is got an attractive map, reasonably attractive pieces, and appears to be pretty much a straight, relatively high level hex encounter war game. Now, BGG says the playtime on this is 60 minutes, and I'm not convinced that that's an accurate statement. I think that's this is Stacking Limit says he thinks this game was a game, liked it as a game and not as a simulation. I think it's a reasonable decision for a designer to say, I care more about the game being good than the simulation being good. Okay. Now that may inform my analysis of it, right? That may be a turn on or a turn off for me. And I lean more toward the simulation-y stuff personally. Again, see also by Mr. President. But this is a legit choice for a designer to make at the same time. So you also got to figure out, what do we even mean by these words, man? We don't have like a diction, like a master wargamer dictionary that we could refer to with hard and fast definitions of any of this stuff, which has created no end of grief over the years. Carl says that Prometheus was an artistic disaster. I would argue that it was a disaster on every level except for special effects, which were pretty good, and the cast was good. I felt like the cast was criminally misused. To be fair, and Rob Johnson agrees with me. It was a multi-dimensional disaster. Half-ass gaming. Some people did like Prometheus. Matt Colville, whose opinion on movies I respect greatly, liked Prometheus. I think he's wrong. I think it's a total piece of garbage. I have heard that Alien Covenant is better, but I have not seen it, and I am not going to go pay for a streaming service to watch that. So Nordic Maelstrom needs a Market Garden game. Several of these are recent. I don't know what the availability on this one is. Noble Knight wants $85 for it, which sounds, considering that it came out in 2012, seems a little high. It seems like maybe there's some collectability going on here. And I don't know that the hour playtime is way off, right? I suspect this is a pretty quick game. Target Arnhem across 6 bridges. So this is the kind of the wild card here, because I'm trying to figure out what's going where. Because this was apparently a game that was given away free at Origins at one point by Multiman Publishing. I am told that it is I'm told by BGG that it is a Japanese game, and it looks real small, by Tetsuya Nakamura and Jun Tajima, with art in the English version by Nico Escubi. Now, I've never seen this for sale, like physically, but copies can be had on BGG for a pretty low price. So if you want like a really legitimately small Market Garden game, maybe this is the one to get. Now, I couldn't find the name of it because I told them when they were asked that there was a postcard game contest like in the last 8-10 months. And somebody had done a very slick looking postcard game of Market Garden. And I frankly would have put it in this list if I could find the friggin' thing, but I couldn't. This is probably not too much bigger than a postcard game. This is the whole map is probably 60 hexes. It's like 6 hexes wide by about 15 hexes long, something like that. So real small, and not totally out of line for a postcard game. Let me put it that way. All right. So other than that, and I like the cover too, actually. So this is Paul Koenig's Market Garden, and it was released in 3 volumes by Victory Point Games. There's a volume for Eindhoven, a volume for Nijmegen, and a volume for Arnhem. And if you put all 3 of them together, you can do the entire Operation Market Garden. These were produced to the Victory Point Games standard, which is not amazing, but was fine as long as you didn't mind the. I'm not sure if these came with the laser cut counters or not, to be honest. A lot of people balked at the laser cut counters because of the soot that they left. But this is a reasonably interesting and attractive looking game series that kind of fits the whole thing into very small packages that you could then play in a modular way. And I think that's actually pretty attractive. It would be cool if a game like Holland 44 would have had scenarios like that, but it does not. There is a short scenario of Holland 44, but there's no like 3 different scenarios for the 3 different bridge scenarios. And I believe Holland 44 is out of print already, by the way. And as David Harrison points out, David, welcome to the stream. Hell's Highway is being updated and reprinted by New England Simulations. Updated by John Butterfield. It will be a modified design or redesign. I expect it to be significantly different and noticeably different from the Victory Games version. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So I've actually handled these, but I have not played any of them. So I don't have a lot to say about these other than I have had a couple conversations with Paul Koenig, and I feel like his design sense is kind of in the right place in a lot of ways. So that is one reason why these made this particular list. It's time to drink more scotch. Since I'm getting fairly gravelly here. So Perminis Albion says the Simonich games are GMT's bread and butter games. They'll be reprinted soon enough. It will be reprinted soon enough, but I think GMT's bread and butter games are Coin, Combat Commander, Twilight Struggle, and Commands and Colors, frankly. That's the stuff that keeps the lights on. Much more so than the Simonich games. That said, as they're like straight war games go, the Simonich games are amongst the most popular. I think are totally worth your time. So, oh dear, Joe Faust took it to Russia, and no idea what the maid thought. We I think we found out what happened. The cleanup crew at Buckeye Game Fest may have picked up a couple of cups that they thought were garbage that were actually chip pull cups. Yeah, Chet Bell, David Thompson is one of the 2 people that was involved in that. And I don't remember who the other person was, and I feel terrible. But they were less handsome than David Thompson. So there's that. Meandering Mike says Grant and Alexander's wives played one of the Paul Koenig titles. That might be interesting to watch, but I have not personally watched that. All right, next up is what I would call kind of a borderline classic. This is Air Bridge to Victory. This is one of the first 4 or 5 games or something like that that GMT produced. Okay. It's a Gene Billingsley design, and I think it's one map. It is one map, so it kind of fits all of Market Garden onto one map. But it's got 2 counter sheets or a counter sheet and a half, so it's it's not a tiny game. I think it would remind folks of Hell's Highway in terms of size, but it's a little small. The map footprint's a little smaller than Hell's Highway, which is 2 maps, as I recall. Okay, thank you, Meandering Mike, for mentioning this. So he did the postcard game for the Postcard from the Front Game Jam, sponsored by Hissy Cat Studios. He had a co-designer on that, though. Did he not? Am I nuts? I thought he did. So another nice thing about Airbridge to Victory is if you're interested in it, you can get it pretty cheap. Did I sell an Airbridge to Victory for a buddy in one sale? I might have. This is not an expensive game. It's not a large or heavy game particularly. But you can get a copy of this for $20 or $30 without too much trouble. I mean, maybe not on eBay where you could potentially be buying from a nut, but you can get this reasonably inexpensively. And it's supposed to be decent, right? This has, in comparison to the Tactics game, this is about 800 ranks higher on the war game list over at BGG than the Tactics game is. It's ranked 1972 among war games. Um, uh, Artists credited here include Roger McGowan, so I'm pretty sure that's a Roger McGowan cover reused for one or the other. According to BGG, Airbridge to Victory was 1990, and Operation Market Garden from Hobby Japan was 1982. Um, so it does appear that Hobby Japan beat GMT to the punch on this particular cover. All right. So 175 people watching. That's outstanding. Folks, if you haven't already, please do thumbs up the video. If you want to see video, subscribe to the channel. We got these coming. I'm actually trying to do a video every weekday, counting the live streams as videos. So this week we're all set. We got Traveler Tuesday tomorrow. I'm going to do Traveler Tuesday every other Tuesday for the time being anyway, because I've got the Pendragon thing to do. I hope to have the first episode of that for next Tuesday. This Wednesday, we have another episode of Mr. President. On Thursday, we have the show with Dan at the live show at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Our special guest will be Ty Bamba. That's very exciting. I'm not sure I've ever seen Ty interviewed on video before. So that's awesome. And Dan is doing 99% of the work getting fresh guests. So I will credit Dan completely with that. And then on Friday, we have another episode of Mr. President. So I will warn you, if you are watching the Mr. President series, that the Wednesday episode is about an hour and 26 minutes. Because of that length, remember, that makes it harder for me to edit too. Because of that length, I did a partial activation phase for the next episode, which is on Friday, and it's about 25 minutes. So that is going to be a more typical episode length from now on as we get going. And I want to get it finished so I can do something different too. And I want to get the sort of the pattern of having a playthrough thing going. Nordic Maelstrom, Traveler never left. It did actually leave for a while, but it is back, and it has been back for some time. All right, so Airbridge to Victory, I think a worthy game. If you don't have a copy, hell, there's copies on sale right now on BGG for $20 or $30. I don't have a better picture of this, unfortunately. This is the shitty picture that appears on Board Game Geek. This is Operation Market Garden Descent into Hell from Game Designers Workshop designer Frank Chadwick. And this is one of their double blind games. I think I'd really like to check one of those out. And this would be a good one to check out because I don't think it's particular. We're reloading here. I don't think it's particularly expensive. So you actually play this on two sets of maps, right? So it's double blind. And I'd really kind of like to see how that GDW double blind system works. I'm trying to pull up the marketplace on this, and it's not working. Of course, Frank Chadwick as a designer is always worth keeping an eye on, right? Regardless of whether it was back in the 80s or the 70s or today. So that's not to say you got to like everything Frank did, but he's always got something interesting happening in his designs. Are we even on the internet at this point? What the fuck? So, folks, let me know if there's any significant problems here. John Madison points out Normandy Campaign is another one in that sequence that's in the Double Blind series, and they did a couple of those. This one, if you are looking, I see a listing on Noble Knight for $10. So this is not expensive either, is what it sounds like. Now, that Noble Knight copy might be a terrible condition. I don't know. But sounds like this isn't terribly expensive either. Man, I'm having some significant internet snags over here. Matt Davidson says that it's really unique, and he really liked it. It is something that I would like to check out at some point, among the many other things I would like to check out at some point. So David Harrison, I was trying to look this up, says there's 3: Normandy, Market Garden, and Crusader. But so the Crusader game is different from Operation Crusader, which is an early 70s game or maybe mid 70s, from GDW, which is like a huge monster game. And that is the one that's being redone by Compass. The That's not the double blind Operation Crusader. That's according to BGG. That's called Eighth Army Operation Crusader. So sorry for the terrible picture of this. And I want to say the cover art here is by legendary GDW artist Dave Dietrich, whose art I really liked in Traveler, but who also did some war game covers for them. I want to say he may have done the covers for Assault and Boots and Saddles as well, but I might be wrong about that. Having trouble kind of putting those in my head right now. All right, next up is the much better picture of Monty's Gamble Market Garden. Now, this has been released in at least 3 different formats thus far. Okay, that's different. In at least 3 different editions, if you will. There's a magazine version which showed up in, I think, Operations Magazine. There was a first edition, and then there's this third edition of Monty's Gamble. Now, design credits. I don't own this. Did I do an unboxing of this? I might have. It would have been a buddy unboxing if I did. The game looks pretty good. It's an area impulse game. Design credits on BGG go to David Mailer and Mike Ranella. He of many area impulse games. And it's supposed to be very good. And the latest edition from MMP is very nice. I can vouch for that. And somebody's selling a VG copy on BGG Marketplace right now for $25, and Noble Knight has it for 53. And I'm getting that off of that. So we've got a local fella here who really, really likes Assault and Boots and Saddles. John Longshore says, Mr. President looks really good, but above his pay grade. Was have issues running for city dog catcher. Well, you don't have to be an actual politician to run it. I really want to finish the turn before giving anybody anything other than vague impressions on Mr. President so far. I mean, I'll certainly point out if you watch the videos, you certainly will see me pointing out. I'm not sure I'm following this in a couple of places, but only a couple of places. And unlike a lot of solitaire games where you like make no decisions, that's not true with Mr. President. There's plenty of you're rolling a lot of random stuff, but you're making plenty of decisions too. So, all right. So Monty's Gamble, Market Garden from Mike Ranella and Dave Mailer. Moving on to It Never Snows. We're going to find that there's a lot of Market Garden appears to be a favorite topic over at Multiman Publishing. Let me put it that way. We've got It Never Snows. Game designer Dean Essig from a series designed by Dean Essig. And I believe our friend Carl in the chat did the OB research and possibly other research for this as well. Now, this is, I think, a 4-map game at the company level of Market Garden. So it's pretty big. But it's fairly at that size, it's fairly manageable in terms of like counter density. You're not going to have like a big front in this game. You're going to be moving units around. There's plenty of room to maneuver, that kind of stuff. Stacking Limit, thank you very much. Much appreciated. I should probably check this out. Mr. Felton has wrote some books as well, by the way. And as I cannot hear his name now and not hear Mark Felton, the man who looks like a vampire. But he kind of does in that one picture. He kind of does look slightly Dracula-like. 4 banquet-sized tables? Nah, this is not that big. You could put this on definitely 2 4x8 folding tables. 8 foot by 2.5 foot, and you might even be able to get it on 2 6 foot by 2.5 foot folding tables. But I haven't measured that. That doesn't include charts, and there are setup cards in this as well. Now I have this. I haven't played it, other than the very gamers-like choice of counter colors for certain units, which is a thing that you see in SCS games and much less so in other games, where there's like a color that I can only describe as puce is used in here. Carl says it's 8.5 feet long, actually. So I will take Carl's word for it. But it's a big game, right? This isn't a small footprint game, but the counter density is not that high. I want to say it's 3, maybe 4 counter sheets. And you will need additional footprint for the setup cards as well. So the game has a good reputation. So does the Day of Days, however, and I don't like Day of Days, so I don't know if I will like it or not. But I am more likely to like this because I think it's a better choice of scale than we saw in Day of Days. That's like my main objection to Day of Days is kind of the combination of map scale, counter scale, and game system that I felt was incongruous. Whereas I think that sits a lot more comfortably with It Never Snows. 10-hour game, that seems a little optimistic. I suspect it'll be a little longer than that. Nordic Maelstrom says it's 5 maps. Okay. And then the 11 by 17s would be the displays, right? And 840 count, which is 3 counter sheets. Is that right? Yeah, that's 3 counter sheets. Brant is back. Thanks, Brant, for coming back. Much appreciated. Don't you have like a soccer game to be at or something like that at 10 p.m., whatever, however late that was run? So getting this on the table is probably going to happen sooner or later. I got to clip it yet. Actually, it is one of the sort of not sort of rarities in this library that's like not clipped or not even punched. Right? Not even not. There's I've got a decent amount of stuff back here on this SPI shelf that's punched but not clipped. But there's not a lot of games that are just totally unpunched here. Even the Europa stuff tends to be not totally unpunched. So, all right. So, Joe Faust says he thought Day of Days was counter overkill. Yeah, and I think that's part of the issue. Is like the stacking really doesn't quite make sense, right? Where you end up with these absurd stacks with the landings. I didn't. It's a thing that felt really clumsy to me when playing Day of Days. We have not, in fact, covered War Eagles Dare and the Devil's Cauldron, Brian Gash. So, and as Brand has mentioned before, It Never Snows is going to be the all-day Saturday game at the Fall Assembly for the Armchair Dragoons in North Carolina in October. Full details at the Armchair Dragoons website at armchairdragoons.com. So, Kilroy is here. Welcome back. Much appreciated for coming by. You've missed everything. We're now done. So, no, this isn't true though, Carl. If you look at GTS Normandy, I mean, it's not all in Normandy either. And yeah, it's company level. I mean, that's kind of the problem I had with it is that I didn't feel like, based on the scale, I felt like I mean, you're stuck with that stacking, right? I mean, that's the scale you picked. I just don't think that was the best scale. I think that the combination of those three things did not work for me. Moving on to SPI's Arnhem. This was part of the Westwall quad. This is a very early game. Do I have a thing of this? Yeah, I do. I want to say this was like 1973, 1976. So this is part of the Westwall Quad, and despite the name, it covers all of Operation Market Garden. We actually talked about that. I discovered that when we started talking about the SPI quads. It's not just Arnhem; it's the whole operation. Now, this was re-released in under a different under a different title, A Bridge Too Far, presumably to tie it in with the movie. But the timing doesn't, I don't know that the timing really makes sense on that, to be completely honest. When did the movie come out? I thought it was like 74. Maybe that was later than that. So the designer edition that says A Bridge Too Far on the cover is at 1977. And then the folio and the Westwall quad, I think, come out in 76. This looks like a fairly promising and interesting game. Apparently a Jay Nelson design. I'd be interested in trying this, but I'm not really going to run down a copy of the Westwall quad to get it. And the third party prices are high for a full SPI folio, to be honest. Now I think they did this is a boxed version, so they did this in both the folio and the box, which is relatively unusual, but SPI did it in a couple of different places. Joe Prez says that Howie Barish arranged for the movie license tie-in, and Carl said that the movie came out in 77, which makes the timing make complete sense, actually. To my knowledge, it's basically the same game. And I think we covered that Jay Nelson was the designer here. And the other boxed version, the Bridge Too Far, Patty Rafesky version is the blue one. Thanks for coming by the way. Welcome back to the stream. And to my knowledge, the Bridge Too Far version only appeared in a box. But I'll be happy to be corrected on that. And there are folks here who know how to be corrected. Now, I'm gonna probably get demonetized for putting this on the camera, but here we are with Hell's Highway. So this is a John Butterfield classic from Victory Games, and it is an extremely highly regarded game. We are, by the way, doing these in ascending order of my opinion of them. And this is the third from the top. Hell's Highway. It's a pretty attractive map for 1980. Is this 83? 83. However, Ted Caller did the graphics on this, as far as I know. However, the counters in this game are some of the worst counters I have ever personally handled. The reason for that is just the size of everything. The gutters on this particular era of Victory Games counters were really, really big. So they compressed all the information into like the middle fourth of the counter, it felt like. So everything is absurdly tiny. The same thing is true of Victory Games Vietnam, but I think it's worse here than it is in Vietnam. Now, if you look at like the Fleet games or Omaha Beachhead, where they had bigger counters to play with, they're totally fine. And the map, like I said, the map is, it's a Victory Games map from 1983, so it's maybe not going to win any 2023 graphics awards. But I nevertheless think that it's a fairly decent looking map. It does have that kind of hex by hex terrain that Victory Games often favored, and that is somewhat out of fashion now as a graphic design choice. Yes, so we're going to talk about this now too. So let me go back to Artem so I keep that off the screen to make the robots mad. There is a new edition of Hell's Highway, which I believe will be called John Butterfield's Hell's Highway, coming from New England Simulations, and I think it may be the next thing in New England Simulations pipeline after Winter's Victory. Marty Sample, if he's still around, will correct me on that or verify that that is probably the case. Now, I do think that this is well, I don't think. We talked to John Butterfield, and he's making some changes to Hell's Highway. So expect it to be noticeably different from the original version. And I'm very curious to see that. And of course, New England Simulations has marvelous production quality standards, and I expect that to be really, really good. If I haven't mentioned it, and I haven't, there is a link to the Ardwulf Lair Discord community in the ticker. That'll be good for a week as of when I generated it earlier today. So they're not running out after a day anymore. So if you haven't joined the Ardwulf Lair Discord, please do, where it is starting to pick up. I'm pretty sure we actually asked John Butterfield this, and I believe he said no. So I don't think so. I don't think so. I could be wrong. I might be misremembering that. I might be thinking of somebody else. We actually mentioned Alistair Logie. This was actually mentioned earlier, and I haven't played it, so I can't really see it. I believe the Operational Art of War also has a market garden scenario, and there is a there's a couple other market garden computer games as well. Shelt 44 includes market garden from whoever did Shelt 44. Name's blanking on me right now. Ooh, so I'll point this out. Limey, and I didn't know Limey Yank Games had them, but there is an alternate set of Hell's Highway counters that fix the counter problem with Hell's Highway. Let me put it that way. And Mark Simonich pointed out I sliced my arm open a little bit today, cutting the trees down. But those counters pretty much fix that problem, right? And Mark Simonich, in designing in his designer's notes of Holland 44, said, a major inspiration was Hell's Highway. So Dave D'Angelo is asking if he's going to make the solo game. I don't think so. I think it's going to still be a 2-player game. War Game Design Studios, John Tiller Games. War Game Design Studios kind of bought or licensed or took over the John Tiller games. Shelf 44 is the John Tiller game that I'm thinking. Avalanche Press is a close 50 second. We'll pass that along to Mike Benninghoff when we get him on the show. Let me put it that way. I think I just mentioned this. The Operational Art of War has a few market garden scenarios. There's one in that comes in the game. Now I have it and I've fiddled with it a little bit, and it was not singing to me. John C. from the sunny Philippines. Yes, there's always Monday night. Always Monday night. All right. The Shelf 44. So this is now available from War Game Design Studio, but it was available from John Tiller. So, okay. So, moving on from Hell's Highway, eventually, is Holland 44. This is the Mark Simonich game. As mentioned previously, this is out of print, but the reprint has made the cut, as in the 500. So this is going to get reprinted sooner or later. There are mounted boards available. You can order the mounted boards if you want. They won't fit in the box if you do. So FYI. This is like a map and a half, or a map and 2/3, or a map and 1/3, or something like that. I want to say it's about a map and a half, put long ways. So highly playable in one sitting, very engaging. It's it's a toss up, right? The good player playing the Germans could win as the Germans. Good player playing as the Allies can win as the Allies. It also does split reasonably naturally, at least two ways. If you do, you don't do that by nationality. However, you do that. Well, you do that by nationality. You do that. You don't do it by nationality. You give one allied player the airborne and one allied player 30 core. That's how we did it, and it worked fairly well. It is a terrific game. Alan Salazar asks if it's the best of the lot. That's debatable, but I think you can certainly make a case that it's the best of the lot. It's really self-contained. So it's kind of smaller. It's other than Salerno 43, it's the smallest game in the series. Is that accurate? Technically, no. Normandy 44 is, but this plays a little faster than Normandy 44 does. And I love Normandy 44 as well, by the way. I like this whole series, to be completely honest. So this cut is sticking to the chair, by the way. That's why I keep moving my arm. I think this is a really rock solid game. It plays really well, and in comparison to the rest of the series, until Salerno 43 came out, I felt like this was the ideal entry point, right? None of them are like a quantum leap in complexity over any of the other ones. I don't think. They're all a little bit different. France 40's been out of print forever, though, to be honest, as the one true phlegm. We reprinted that on P500 as well, and I think it'll eventually get reprinted, although I don't know where it is with relation to its number. I will 100% put this under Plexi with paper maps. I generally So GMT mounted maps are nice, but they tend to pooch quite a bit. Now, I did backbend the Mr. President maps, and I got those to lay flat. You could generally work with it to make the map lay flat, but a lot of times they'll produce like we'll do a game, we'll make mounted maps, but they'll be separate. But then if you buy the mounted maps, you don't have room in the box to fit the mounted maps. And to me, that's nonsensical. I don't know why that makes any sense to anybody. Dave D'Angelo says that it's the best game for Market Garden in Dave's opinion, not 100% historical. No, but at this scale, it's not going to be. Plays so well, even a diehard history buff like himself can look past it. I have not played Memoir 44 Market Garden. I have played Memoir 44 Normandy, and it was a terrible experience. So that could have been scenario. I don't know. Maybe Market Garden's great. But I mean, what am I doing with Market Garden? I mean, Memoir is on this side of the battlefield is the enemy, and on this side of the battlefield is me. How does that fit into Market Garden? Okay, I got concerns, right? Because we're going this way, there's enemies to both sides, right? So I don't know. There's a lot of playthrough video on Holland 44. I'm gonna actually talk about a couple ideas I have for the next playthrough videos after we're done with Market Garden here, which we will have a bit of extra time at the end. So yeah, this is getting reprinted, no doubt about that. It is a fine game. I really like it, and it's a kind of playable in a day. It took us about 6 hours, for example. Highly playable, very engaging. It's well balanced, probably ahistorically so, to be honest. But it's nevertheless well balanced. Um, uh, John, I don't agree with you on this, and as I don't agree for the sake of not being dismissive of memoir. Memoir is commands and colors, right? And it's really kind of very tightly structured. I am on this side, you are on that side. I have a left, a center, and a right. You have a left, a center, and a right. Okay, and that's how the activations work. And all the memoir I have played, which has all been big games, works that way. So if your battlefield layout does not comport to that, then you're going to have problems creating a non-ridiculous version of any particular of that particular battle, right? Um so and 40K at least doesn't have that particular problem, right? I have much lower opinion of 40K than I have of Memoir. Number 1 on my personal list is this pair of games, The Devil's Cauldron and Where Eagles Dare. These are the Grand Tactical Series games from MMP and designer Adam Starkweather. I have done not a lot of video on it, but I have done some video on GTS. Now, you may recall that 4 years ago, something like that. I think it was 4 years ago at Winterfest, we did the whole thing. I was playing Core Felt up in the Devil's Cauldron section of it. Played together this, and you kind of got to run down the like linking rules on the internet and use those. That will make it play a lot better. Unless you're playing it with like 2 or 4 people, then maybe you don't need to do that. But if you're playing it at a convention where you want to move fast and you got 8 people or 10 people, which we did, then you do want those linking rules because you basically end up with 3 different chip pools, and that makes everything go much faster. We finished this game in the span of the 7 days or 8 days or whatever it was that we played this at Winterfest. So to answer Perfidious Albion, yes, I have seen this laid out. Now, is there a picture that I can show you on Board Game Geek if it will frigging load of the whole thing laid out? There might be. Hold on. Because it's not a straightforward layout. This is 4 maps, okay? And the Where Eagles Dare, I think, is 5 maps. But in Devil's Cauldron has some like little extension maps in a couple of places that make it not quite fit on 2 4x6 or 2.5 by 6 folding tables. The whole thing is approximately 15 feet long. And it's the Where Eagles Dare maps do not intersect squarely with the Devil's Cauldron maps. They intersect at an angle. So what that ends up meaning is that if you don't just say fuck it and split it up, which is how we did it, onto 2 separate sections, then you're going to end up with like a map, like 2 maps and 1 map of Where Eagles Dare, and then 4 maps at the top at an angle, about a 60-degree angle for the Devil's Cauldron. So footprint wise, this is very challenging. It was kind of one of the things I was trying to do was to kind of arrange the game room so that I could set this up because this is a great experience. This is a fabulous experience. So thank you, John Longshore. Much appreciated. I will have a video on this actually. So I have a couple of different things going on, but the pet gate that I have bought and then modified so that it is theoretically cat proofed has thus far kept the cats out of the room. Thus far, it's not perfect. They could theoretically jump over it. And then if that becomes an issue, that's so kind of Mr. President was kind of the test for that, right? But they haven't managed to get, they haven't managed or been sufficiently interested to get over it yet. Let me put it that way. I don't expect so all right. So there is a reprint of the Devil's Cauldron available on Multi-Man for pre-order right now, and that should be coming soonish. Okay. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but it might be next year. The Germans won the big game, by the way, when we played. Doc League B. League B. I don't know how to pronounce that. But yeah, the Germans won despite really good Allied progress. But First Airborne did not successfully, could not hold out long enough. They got annihilated. And that's the game. So I don't expect this to be, I don't expect Regal's Dare to be reprinted. I think if you want it, you're going to have to go to bat for it. Which is damn unfortunate. Now, at one point, MMP was talking about combining both games into a single box, which would presumably have cost $1 million, and then updating the whole thing to the GTS second edition rules. And I was like, Mel, this is going to be really expensive, but I'll probably buy it. Maybe not for $1 million, but I mean, I would think it was going to be 400. That's a speculative number, but that was my guess. But that got dropped because they didn't want to spend the time it would take to replay test everything, and it does in fact work fine under GTS 1. Everybody likes GTS 2 better, but GTS 1 in these two games works completely fine. So you're stuck with GTS 1, but that's okay. You can get a reasonably priced, it's expensive, but I mean it's not, third party sellers expensive. Version of the Devil's Cauldron, which if you just get one is the one to get because it's got way more playability in the box than Regal's Dare does. Regal's Dare has a bullshit learning scenario, a one map scenario, which is okay. It's really not showing the system off. And then like the campaign, which is 5 maps, right? So footprint wise, it's really challenging. Where the Devil's Cauldron has a bunch of big scenarios, little scenarios, like most of the other GTS games, has a wide scenario selection of different sizes, learning scenarios, small scenario, whatever. So, and yes, the Devil's Cauldron reprint is a straight reprint. The one that if you were to go pre-order it right now, it's going to be a straight reprint, except that it's going to be in a standard MMP 3-inch box rather than the flat box, which is interesting. And I'm not sure what the reasoning there is. Utah will be in a flat box, by the way, and we may see Utah this year. I hope we do. How long after it charges do the P500 games ship? Are we talking about MMP or are we talking about GMT? Because MMP just has pre-orders, GMT has P500. MMP after the charge, I've never had it be more than a day or two, maybe 3 days. GMT sometimes charges me 2 months before the game ships. So that's unusually long. Usually it's not quite that long, but usually it's about a month. This is a chit pull system, as has been mentioned in the chat. So if you like just hate chit pull, maybe you won't like this, but I feel like this is a really interesting chit pull because the chit pull itself has decisions built into it, right? There is like a whole points system whereby you have command points that when certain types of chits come up, you can do things and by spending command points. And when other types of chits come up, you can do things without spending command points. There are also dispatch points, which you can use to buy extra chits for individual components of your overall command that then go in the cup and are their own chits, and which are really powerful. But because you don't have to spend the command points to attack, but then you're just limited to that particular regiment or whatever it is, right? So I really like this system. I think it's a lot of fun to play. I do know that they're going to be doing Normandy at GTS Normandy at Tempe this year. I will not make it. I will be very fortunate to make it out, but not to have gas money to get back from WBC. Let me put it that way. So uh, I don't know that MMP has said this, but I would be very surprised if they reprinted Where Eagles Dare. That's one of those games where they kind of complained that it sat around for a long time. So I got around the Mr. President P500 pre-order charge fee by not pre-ordering it and paying full price. So that was, maybe not the greatest move on, but it's how I felt about ordering it at the time too. So remember that I am last on GMT's shipping list. So that's just how it is. Oh boy. So I believe these are very different systems. So Nordic Maelstrom asks about Brazen Chariots, which is a BCS game, which is about Operation Crusader, but also includes Brevity and Battle Axe. And North Africa 41, which is a Simonich game from GMT, which is not the Zokbon system because it doesn't have Zokbons. It's a redo of his earlier game, The Legend Begins. And I believe it covers all of the Western Desert campaign. I could be wrong about that because I haven't checked. Whereas Brazen Chariots does not. In addition, they are extremely different systems. So if you have an interest in that campaign, of which the Western Desert stuff, am I misstating the scope of North Africa 41? Does it cover into 42? I guess is the question that I don't know. And I don't think I've pre-ordered it actually. So if you're interested enough in North Africa as a topic to like support buying multiple games on it, then I see no reason why you wouldn't buy both. That said, of these, if I had both of these games on my shelf right now, and you, Nordic Maelstrom, came over and said, which one of these would you like to play? I would pick Brazen Chariots, and it would not take me long to make that decision. But that has a lot more to say about how much I like Brazen Chariots and BCS over any negative opinions that I might have about North Africa 41, which are zero. I have zero negative opinions about North Africa 41. I expect it to be pretty good. So, maybe GMT like puts the content creators last. That's plausible. I'll accept that as a working theory. All right. So these are the last two games on my Market Garden list. I know there's some that I left off, but there's not too many I left off. So it's an interesting. You feel like there's a lot of games on Market Garden, and there's maybe lint all over me somehow. And there's less than it seems like, right? There's still plenty. But until Hell's Highway comes out, there's like, I think you can still get Monty's Gamble from MMP, I think. So hey man, I'll play Brazen Chariots. That's no problem. I got no problem playing BCS. We are in fact oops, shit. We screwed that up. I hit the wrong button. We're in fact resuming our last Blitzkrieg game on Wednesday. So Dave D'Angelo says, thanks for talking about Market Garden games. His grandparents were liberated on September 18th by the 101st in Eindhoven. That's amazing. So that's pretty cool. Let's see here. Looks like we're topping out at 175 tonight, although we have a little less than that right now. Folks, if you haven't done so already, please do like the video, thumbs up, all that. Clip that like button because that sounds so dumb. And subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. And if you'd like to do more to support the channel, then please consider becoming a patron. There's a link to that in the video description. So I'm trying to get to now that I'll be frank here and say that the Charles S. Roberts Awards for a while were taking like a lot of my gas. Okay. But once we got the voting done, the compilation of those votes was done reasonably efficiently. So I've been able to, and you may have noticed that there were less videos, right? Because there was nothing else, nowhere else to cut was the extra videos I was doing. This is a very valuable and highly sought after ASL piece. The only reason is because of the black SS counters. And I think that's weird. If you really need black SS counters, you can go to one of the third party people making black SS counters and go buy those instead of paying $700 or $800 or whatever it costs for a bridge too far. I haven't played it. I have actually was just talking to yesterday to one of my ASL folks who has played it and whose opinion of it is not that high. So, so uh, if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much. I'm not sure I've heard that before. That is yes, Dave. Thank you for sharing that. Let me echo Alan Salazar's statement on that. So I don't think that a bridge too far for ASL is. I mean, if you got it, great. But if you don't have it, no, I don't think it's worth it. To be blunt. Um, and I don't know that the Arnhem battle itself is necessarily interesting in considering that it's the Germans slowly grinding down the British over the span of like a week. That does not necessarily sound all that interesting. And I do say that also finding the idea of the German Soviets grinding the Germans down over the span of months in red barricades to be very attractive. So, so there's that. Yes, but and they're supposed to do this, but A, God knows when it'll happen. B, it will not have the black SS counters. They have said that. And I don't know what the other bridge things are, but I mean, there's certainly enough demand for ASL product for them to release a historical every year, right? So Pegasus Bridge, did they do Primasol Bridge? I mean, I know there was material on Primasol Bridge, but I thought that was third party. I might be wrong. I am not the guy when it comes to talking about the noodly bits of the ASL history. Um, this is true too. This actually creates problems in play because of concealment, because you can spot the SS counters. So now there was a Pegasus Bridge module too, which I actually had the opportunity to buy for like $50, and I probably should have it that for that price, but I didn't, and I'm fine with the fact that I didn't. I'm good. But any particular European West Front major battle that you've heard of, there's ASL support for that. Let's leave it at that. So, in terms of, we have about 8 minutes here, and I kind of want to feel out what folks think about what they would like to see in terms of playthrough. So, I'm kind of trying to develop a workflow to do playthrough content. And as you continue to watch Mr. President videos, you will see that evolve somewhat. You'll find, I think, that the fourth episode, which is the one that will appear on Friday, is noticeably tighter than the previous episodes. And it's not because I only played part of the activation phase. It's tighter. Even if I had played the rest of the activation phase, it would still be shorter than the hour and 26 minutes. Okay. Paul West, thanks for stopping by. Um, so solitaire games actually lend themselves really well to playthrough video, right? Because I'm not dependent on another person. I don't have to worry about hidden information. So I actually thought about, there is no way I'm going to do Goss playthrough video. There's just no way. Unless it's like an example, I might consider doing like an example video of, okay, here's how movement works in Goss, which would be worth doing. But I'm not going to do playthrough of that. That's not going to happen. Or OCS, because um, OCS makes terrible content. So not that I necessarily couldn't find a formula to make that work. I think I could, but BCS would make much better video. It would just make much better video. I was thinking about, now I've already done the Hunters. Nordic Maelstrom recommends Silent Victory. I've already done the Hunters, and that video did extremely well. But I'd be better off picking something like Western Front Ace or something that just came out than Silent Victory, which I do have, but which has been out for eons. BCS, Aircore, Jason Williams mentions Aircore. There is video playthrough of that. Just a Guard did video playthrough of that, and his is very good. I recommend watching. Um, so Nordic Maelstrom, so BCS sounds like a really good idea. And Aircore is very sort of compact in terms of I could get it would be very I could do video efficiently. I'm kind of talking myself into it here. Video fairly efficiency in Aracore. OCS Smolensk, how on earth do you advance quickly or do anything useful with X artillery? You got to be careful with artillery. You can't just fire it willy nilly at everything. But you gotta also sometimes you gotta use it. Sometimes you're not gonna have the air to DG targets with, and you're gonna need to use artillery. And you got a much better chance of now. I have done playthrough video of Blind Sword, so that's probably not going to happen. Go check the video out of the P Ridge game. And I liked it, so that I bought the rest of them. I will Princess Ryan's Star Marines will not be making an appearance. Uh, MMP reluctant enemies that John Longshore mentioned. This is one of the few that I think actually would work. But you're, in the space of sort of compacting OCS, you're necessarily leaving out a number of the interesting things about OCS because of the scale of the thing that you've chosen. Okay. Um, where BCS, you're actually highlighting that, and because of the activation based system, it sort of lends itself very naturally to an episodic structure. Um, this is actually a really good idea. Doug Layart mentions the GTS Strike Counter Strike. That's the SAR game that just came out in the GTS magazine. This would actually be a very good choice, and I actually need to punch and clip that, by the way. Air barrage is great, but a lot of times air barrage doesn't work. You cannot depend on air barrage. Sometimes you have to use actual artillery. So I've got this actually. I have that, right? Yes, I have that. And I don't have Aurelian, the Restorer of the World, which I'm now tempted to buy. This is possible. I don't know if anybody's done playthrough of this. And as Stackley points out, Steve Jolges is doing Reluctant Enemies right now. I appear to be safe from Goose Green for at least the next 6 months. I don't think it'll be out before then. And it's often appealing to do something that is in print that people can theoretically at least go get. One that so the problem with this Joe Prez is that I've only got one, and it's Field Commander Napoleon, which is a little bit of a bigger project. I think it's a terrific game, by the way, but it's a bit of a bigger project than I'm willing to undertake, I think. And there is playthrough video of Field Commander Napoleon already. I think Stuka Joe did some, and I think somebody else did some too. TCS might be interesting. Now, TCS, it wouldn't be like something in print unless it was Goose Green, but nevertheless, you might get that might be very interesting, actually. Siege of Jerusalem, I don't have that. Panzer's Last Dance, kind of big, but there are small scenarios in all those games, so that's not necessarily an obstacle. I mean, I don't necessarily want to tie myself down making a playthrough that's going to take me a year and a half to film, right? So, which is one motivation for me playing only 1 year of Mr. President. Combat Commander is absolutely out. There's plenty of playthrough of Atlantic Chase already. But so you guys, Most Fearful Sacrifice. This is actually a good idea. Wouldn't be a bad idea. Wouldn't be Mont Saint Jean. If I was going to do La Bataille, I would choose Vauchamp because that's extremely tight and small. Remember that, I mean, I've got a decent sized table in here, but it's not unlimited either, right? So I needed to be able to fit in a footprint where I can get all the lights around it and all that other stuff. And when you see the episode 4, you'll actually see the light setup too. Smaller OSG Napoleonic battle, this kind of thing is completely on the table. There's tons of small ones. Seas of Thunder, absolutely not. Peloponnesian War, I had it, I got rid of it. That was probably not a great idea, but I did get rid of it. Nobody has ever done a TCS detailed playthrough. This is true. But I do think that TCS waits for Goose Green. South Pacific, I'm not good enough at Empire of the Sun to manage that. To be honest, I'd be like ruinously incompetent. Snippet from Third World War is not a terrible idea. There are some small scenarios of that. That's worth doing, and that's coming back into print too. Under the Southern Cross might be a good idea, actually. That's not a bad idea at all. Field Commander Lee's not coming out anytime soon, though, I don't think. So, funnily enough, if you watch the Origins walkthrough of the vendor hall, somebody's selling files or for 3D printed gaming tables. You can now print your entire gaming table with a 3D printer. It will cost you more than a fancy wooden table in filament, and it will take hundreds of hours to print a tiny end table sized gaming table. So, totally not worthwhile. Um, but a fascinating development. GBOH is a possibility, actually, not hoplite necessarily specifically, but anything GBOH is a possibility. One True Phlegm suggests 2040, the new American Civil War, whatever that's called. I get that. I hard passed on that one. No, thank you. Small scenario of GTS of any kind is plausible, but the best vehicle for that now is Strike Counter Strike. So I think they told me 400 hours, but it's still the size of a coffee table. And then I worry about can I scale this up? Because it kind of looks like you can, but I'd be concerned that it would like not support its own weight. And at that point, I might as well buy $50 worth of 2x4s and a piece of plywood and make my own gaming table, right? So it is an amusing novelty and not something I actually spent the points on. One of the Hexasim games is a great idea. Another thing that's very tempting. One of the first things that I said upon actually looking at Mr. President was, this looks really cool, but it would be even cooler if it was Mr. Imperator and you were playing the game as Domitian. And then it occurred to me after making that crack on Twitter that game basically exists. It is called Rome Inc., and it was an Against the Odds magazine a few years ago. Now, it's not as detailed as Mr. President, but you might see Rome Inc. playthrough. But the next playthrough content you will see, barring Mr. President, is I want to get this weekend, I want to get the Pendragon Solitaire scenario from the starter set started, and then we'll go every other Tuesday on that. So that series, the Mr. President series, is going over very well. No, I disagree with Stigler on this. It's friggin' life changing for counter storage, man. Now, am I like printing everything, kitchen utensil? No, I'm not. But for counter storage, it's amazing. I did pick up Free at Last. Probably unlikely to do a playthrough of that, but I don't have the Stukijo solo system because I'm happy enough playing those games just two-handing them, to be honest. And I don't have them all, so that's another thing. And you could certainly do this with 3D printing as well. I've tried to play coin with the bots, and I find it remarkably detaching from like the flow of the game, right? To then have to dive into this flow chart and figure out what the bot's doing. I would just rather act as the bot, to be honest. There's not that much hidden information. Is there really any hidden information in coin? There really isn't. So I'm completely fine just three-handing that or four-handing that. Other games with hidden information, a bot becomes more attractive, but coin doesn't really have that. So, all right, folks. HMS GRD Total War. That'll be great when it comes out in 2075. We'll get right on that. Thankfully, I will be dead by then. So, okay, folks, we are slightly over time. So I would like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We've had a great response. We had very good numbers tonight. I would like to thank you all for the super chats and the super stickers or whatever they are. So that is much appreciated as well, and helping me recover from the soaking I gave myself at Origins. We will be back on tomorrow with a new video. The 10 a.m. is the release time for videos. We can technically play against AI right now, John, except that it's a shitty AI. That's the problem. Vicky, thanks for stopping by. Everybody else, stop. Vince Reed, Doug Blair, Mike M, thanks for stopping by. We will head you folks off to enjoy the rest of your evening. And don't forget that we will be back next week with another topic. I've had this market garden thing in the cooker for months, and I didn't put it on the list until literally this morning. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.